There was a certain fisherman, advanced in age, who had a wife and 3 children, and though he was in indigent circumstances, it was his custom to cast his net every day, no more than 4 times. One day he went forth at the hour of noon to the shore of the sea, and put down his basket, and cast his net, and waited until it was motionless in the water. When he drew together its strings, he found it to be heavy. He pulled, but could not draw it up. So he took the end of the cord and knocked a stake into the shore and tied the cord to it. He then stripped himself and dived round the net and continued to pull until he drew it out. Whereupon he rejoiced and put on his clothes. But when he came to examine the net, he found in it the carcass of an ass. At the sight of this he mourned and exclaimed, "There is no strength nor power but in God, the high, the great. This is a strange piece of fortune." And he repeated the following verse: "O thou who occupiest thyself in the darkness of night and in peril, spare thy trouble, for the support of providence is not obtained by toil." He then disencumbered his net of the dead ass and wrung it out, after which he spread it and descended into the sea, and exclaiming, "In the name of God," cast it again, and waited till it had sunk and was still. When he pulled it, he found it more heavy and more difficult to raise than on the former occasion. He therefore concluded that it was full of fish, so he tied it, and stripped and plunged and dived and pulled until he raised it and drew it upon the shore, when he found in it only a large jar full of sand and mud, on seeing which he was troubled in his heart, and repeated the following words of the poet: "O angry fate, forbear, or if thou wilt not forbear, relent. Neither favor from fortune do I gain, nor profit from the work of my hands. I came forth to seek my sustenance, but have found it to be exhausted. How many of the ignorant are in splendor, and how many of the wise in obscurity?" So saying, he threw aside the jar, and wrung out and cleansed his net, and begging the forgiveness of God for his impatience, returned to the sea the 3rd time, and threw the net, and waited till it had sunk and was motionless. He then drew it out, and found in it a quantity of broken jars and pots. Upon this, he raised his head towards heaven and said, "O God, thou knowest that I cast not my net more than 4 times, and I have now cast it 3 times. Then, exclaiming, "In the name of God," he cast the net again into the sea and waited till it was still, when he attempted to draw it up, but could not, for it clung to the bottom. And he exclaimed, "There is no strength nor power but in God." And he stripped himself again, and dived round the net, and pulled until he raised it upon the shore, when he opened it, and found in it a bottle of brass, filled with something, and having its mouth closed with a stopper of lead, bearing the impression of the seal of our Lord Suleiman. At the sight of this the fisherman was rejoiced, and said, "This I will sell in the copper market, for it is worth 10 pieces of gold." He then shook it, and found it to be heavy, and said, "I must open it and see what is in it, and store it in my bag, and then I will sell the bottle in the copper market." So he took out a knife and picked at the lead until he extracted it from the bottle. He then laid the bottle on the ground and shook it, that its contents might pour out. But there came forth from it nothing but smoke, which ascended towards the sky, and spread over the face of the earth, at which he wondered excessively. And after a little while the smoke collected together and was condensed, and then became agitated, and was converted into an Efrit, whose head was in the clouds, while his feet rested upon the ground. His head was like a dome, his hands were like winnowing forks, and his legs like masts. His mouth resembled a cavern, his teeth were like stones, his nostrils like trumpets, and his eyes like lamps, and he had disheveled and dust-colored hair.